Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 7th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 United States Senate elections. My monthly prediction for the upcoming Senate races. In just around a year and a quarter, we are going to see a completely different type of United States Senate. Whether that means Democrats in more power or Republicans overall taking control, it will be a shakeup that will be quite fascinating to see. I am very doubtful that every single one of these states will remain with its political party. In fact, I already have some states flipping to a certain political party on this map, and it is just something that we should make a point of just noting that these Senate elections are not going to be the exact same today as they will be in a year from now. So many people have yet to announce or might announce ahead of 2022, and this is just all speculation, sort of treating the race as if the election was held today. Now understand where we are currently. Today, Joe Biden has a plus 6.9% approval rating nationwide, down from a high point of 20% back in the earlier months and somewhere around 10 to 15 points over the past couple months. Joe Biden seems to be at a constant decline in terms of the approval rating, even if it is month by month. In addition, the generic ballot hasn't been showing too good results for the Democratic Party. Keep that in mind when you take a look at this map. While it may seem that the Democrats, and I'm not trying to reveal anything too early, but while it may seem that the Democrats have some type of an increased advantage by the end of the video, understand just how easily it could go to the GOP. And we'll talk about that once we get there. So the circumstance that we are in, the circumstance that the American public is in right now, is that while Joe Biden may still be popular, he's not nearly as popular as he once was. The same way Barack Obama fell out of public favor, the same way George W. Bush did, the same way Bill Clinton did, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, etc. It's routine for presidents to have this honeymoon phase, and then it starts to fizzle out. But for the sake of this video, we're not going to talk too much about the approval rating, and we're more going to focus on the states that are highly competitive ahead of 2022. As of right now, the Democratic Party has 45 safe seats. That's combined with the seats that aren't up for re-election and the ones that I've just characterized as safe. For the GOP, they have around the same amount. You go to states such as Idaho, Utah, Alaska. The reason why it's safe Republican is because I expect it to be a final race between two Republicans. It doesn't matter which Republican that it is, it's still staying in the GOP column. North and South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma are all states that I would characterize to be as safe as well. Now, I'm going to be talking briefly at the end about sleeper states, states that might end up being competitive that otherwise aren't viewed so as of right now, or viewed as less competitive than they might actually end up being. We'll talk about that once we actually get to the end of the video. But right now, the map is at 44 Republicans and 45 Democrats. So Democrats start out with about a one-seat advantage in terms of the overall safe states. But when you come down to the likely states, Republicans actually end up with a one-seat advantage after we characterize the likely states. What is a likely state? Essentially, this is a state where I personally believe that this Republican or Democratic candidate will win by 5 to 15%. I know it's a wide range, but it allows you to understand that it's not super close, but it's also not a safe state. So 5 to 15% I think is the perfect range for some of these states, and you'll sort of understand that once you actually get to them. So the first state we're going to be looking at in this likely column for either political party is the state of Colorado. Now, Colorado is a state where Joe Biden just won by 13.5% in the most recent election. We can actually take a look here on the presidential map when you're taking a look at the state. Joe Biden had a very large victory. It's not necessarily a state in which the GOP is heavily focusing on for 2022, and thus I expect it in sort of a routine fashion, the way that it has voted for Democrats over the past couple of elections, to stay in the Democratic column. I think Colorado could be anywhere from 6 to 10% given the circumstances of 2022 and where Joe Biden stands nationally speaking today. Do I expect that Democrat to win by 13.5%? It's Michael Bennet. He ran for president in 2020. No, I do not. So Colorado, while in the likely column, isn't necessarily on the upper end as it once was on my projections because the Democrats seem to have fallen out of favor from the American public, at least from where they were just a few months prior. That puts the Democrats at 46, but now the Republicans are here to catch up. Their first state that I keep in the likely column is the state of the state of Iowa. Now, I don't necessarily think Iowa is a likely state solely because of Donald Trump. I think this largely has to do with Chuck Grassley and potentially Pat Grassley, who could be taking his place. Chuck Grassley has yet to announce whether or not he's running for United States Senate in 2022. So we still have a little bit of waiting to go to figure out who this Republican nominee is going to be. But for a little bit of reference, Chuck Grassley is a very not necessarily super popular senator in Iowa like he once was, but is a very well-known name, someone who has won re-election, and his actual closest election besides his first election, his closest election in history was in 2016 when he won with over 60% of the vote. So looking at his electoral history, he's an electoral juggernaut and really doesn't lose elections. Now, new polling data suggests that in Iowa, voters actually want him to retire just simply because of his age, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't win re-election if he decides to run. Iowa goes to the GOP by a likely column, and along with Iowa goes the state of Ohio. This is a state where Ohio just went to Donald Trump by 8 points back in 2020. Again, my sole determination factor for the reason why I expect it to be a likely margin for the GOP is not because of Donald Trump, but is largely influenced by it. Ohio used to be a state where Democrats were able to win routinely and won in 2008, 2012, and were expecting to win in 2016. They lost in 2016. They lost in 2020 by the exact same amount. If you take a look at the swing, it's very negligible. Overall, the state really didn't shift between 2016 and 2020, even though in 2018 they did vote for Sherrod Brown in the Senate election. But understand the circumstances of those races. The 2018 Senate race was not contested heavily by the GOP. Jim Renacci, I covered that race. He did not heavily invest in the state the same way we would have seen from the likes of Josh Mandel. And now Josh Mandel is actually running for Senate in 2022, and he's definitely taking a much more conservative, much more Trump wing pathway because he realizes that's how you win primaries in a number of states. But in the state of Ohio right now, I do not expect the Democratic Party, more specifically Tim Ryan, to have an overwhelmingly good performance. I don't think he will do as bad as Joe Biden just because Donald Trump was an exceptionally strong candidate in the state of Ohio, but I don't think that he would come close to winning either. Ohio, I would keep in the likely Republican column. If Josh Mandel ends up that nominee, we might see it move down to lean, but for right now, I'm comfortable enough keeping it in the likely column for the GOP. Expanding beyond there, we had the state of Florida. That might be a shocker to see just given how competitive Florida is. Donald Trump won here by 3.4%, in 2016 by 1.2% in 2016. So Florida is a state where Democrats haven't had much luck in recent elections. Their last statewide victory was 2012, but it is almost always close. And for it to be in the likely column is something to point out because it provides more context about how much Marco Rubio is expected to win by and just how well he does as a candidate across the state of Florida. So Florida in the likely Republican column. But now that puts the Republicans at 47, the Democrats at 46, leaving us with 7 total toss-up races. Now, 4 of these states remain in the lean column, and 3 of them are actually going to be in the tilt column, a little bit different from the way they were before. In my most recent Senate projection, we can actually take a look here. I believe we only had one state, yes, one state in the tilt column, and that was the state of North Carolina. That today expands to 3, and that leaves us with 4 lean states. 4 lean states. So let's take a look at this map. The first state that I'm actually going to characterize as lean is going to be an indicator as to how some of the rest of these states are going to change relative to my most previous prediction. That is the state of North Carolina, where I'm putting it in the lean Republican column. And the reason why I'm doing that is because based off of Joe Biden's deteriorating approval rating and the way that he is viewed across the South, because we can actually take a look here, that's Nevada. We'll talk about Nevada once we actually get there. This is the Reuters Ipsos tracking poll, which actually matches the national average nearly to a T, 50 to 43. So a 7-point difference here, a 6.9% difference according to FiveThirtyEight. Really nothing different there. But when you take a look at the Northeast, Biden's above ground. You take a look at the Midwest, he's doing okay, but not super well. But in the South is where he really seems to have the most amount of resistance from the American public. The West adores him, the Northeast adores him, the Midwest is iffy about him, but the South is dead even. Dead even for the President of the United States, who's approved of on the national level by around 7 points. This will cause a reduction in support for Democrats across the South. Raphael Warnock, Democrats in states such as North Carolina, Sherry Beasley, or Jeff Jackson, whoever that Democratic nominee might end up being, they are now in a less powerful position and a less likely position to actually flip this Senate race. And that brings me to my next point. While we are going to skip over the lean Democratic states for right now, I just want to characterize Georgia as a tilt Democratic state. This state is one state that I really did not like to change out of the lean Democratic column ever since that election actually had been decided. Only one time had I done that, and that was in March of 2021. That was right at the end of the month, and then after that, I moved it back into the lean Democratic column. And while the polling data may suggest that Raphael Warnock wins by margins of 2 to 6%, to be honest, Herschel Walker probably will end up being that nominee, and that's where the closest race actually comes. But as long as Joe Biden's approval rating is even in states such as Georgia and across the South, I really don't expect him or Democrats to perform super well. Raphael Warnock will have that incumbency advantage in the fact that he was recently elected in 2021. That will be good for him, but it will not mean that he won't have a competitive race, especially if Democrats continue to fall out of favor. This dead even in the South is under the assumption that Biden is approved of by 7% plus nationally speaking. If he ends up being unpopular, Warnock actually might be out, and North Carolina could turn into a likely Republican state. Republicans are starting to gain ground on Democrats, and we're starting to see it happen by incremental amounts, but by the 2022 elections, Republicans actually might be able to win back control of the United States Senate. But moving beyond the state of Georgia, we have other states that we need to characterize in the lean Democratic column. These are states that have been in the lean Democratic column that aren't going to change, largely because Joe Biden, in terms of how he's approved of and viewed in certain states, hasn't changed too heavily, at least in these regions. That includes the state of New Hampshire, which is characterized by that Northeastern polling data that shows that he's actually doing pretty well in this state. In addition, Chris Sununu has not yet announced whether or not he's running for United States Senate. He might not even run for United States Senate in 2022. So as of right now, I'm under the assumption it's going to be a lean Democratic state because we have an incumbent Democrat in this race and not many other formidable GOP opponents. Moving over to the state of Nevada, this is a state that I wanted to talk about because right now they seem to be split, but the majority of voters are complacent with who's in office today. That sort of means that while if they were to choose between Democrats and Republicans, they can't really make a distinction, but knowing who's in office right now, they are fine with who's there. Right now, Nevada is controlled by Democrats in terms of the way that the state legislature is, in terms of the way that the governor is, in terms of the way that the two senators are, and these House of Representative members. Nevada is a blue state. Voted for Joe Biden, voted for Hillary Clinton, voted for Obama twice. The last time Nevada actually went to a Republican was in 2004, and that was by a lean margin. So Nevada, for right now, I'm going to characterize as a Democratic state. It hasn't really fluctuated much, but if Democrats start to see a reduction in overall support across the United States, more specifically on the West Coast in this Sunbelt region, then Nevada actually might be even more competitive than originally thought. But Catherine Cortez Masto is above water in terms of overall approval rating and has more of a name ID than Adam Laxalt, the former Attorney General of the state of Nevada, who's looking to beat her in 2022. We will see what happens in Nevada, but right now, it's a lean Democratic state. And the final state I'm going to characterize as a lean state is the state of Arizona. Now, this puts the Democrats in the majority. They retain the majority in 2022 by my characterization. But Nevada is a state that I want to talk about nearly at the end. But for right now, I would say the Democrats are a little bit holding strong across Arizona. If you take a look at the preliminary election data in Arizona, I used to actually have it, I believe, or it might not have fluctuated throughout the entirety of the predictions, but I used to look at it as potentially being a likely state. Democrats probably won't win the state by a likely margin. In fact, I expect it wholeheartedly. That's why I'm giving it this characterization right now to be a lean state. But the polling data suggests that Mark Kelly is ahead by 8 points, 9 points, 10 points, against some candidates by 10, 11, 12 points. And it really just comes down to the fact that Mark Kelly is a popular incumbent. He won in 2020, was seated at the end of 2020. He votes down party line. He doesn't really make Democrats too angry the same way Kyrsten Sinema does, and of course makes Republicans angry. But Arizona now has more Democratic representatives than they do Republican representatives. They have a Democratic victory on the presidential level. Democrats are potentially going to win the governorship in 2022. They came close across the Arizona statewide delegation in terms of their House of Representatives, in terms of their state Senate. So all around, Democrats have made substantial gains in the state of Arizona, and Mark Kelly is going to ride that wave into 2022, at least as it stands currently. Arizona goes into the lean Democratic column. The final two states I'm going to characterize by tilt margins. These are changes from where they previously were. If you want to take a look at my most previous prediction, here it is. North Carolina was a tilt Republican state. Now it's a lean Republican state. Georgia was a lean Democratic state, now a tilt Democratic state. And that means the states of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are likely to follow suit. And the reason being that Joe Biden just simply is falling off out of public favor, and that tremendously impacts the Rust Belt. If you take a look at the American public, according to Reuters, in the Midwest, you'll see here that Joe Biden used to be approved of by a much higher margin at certain points, up 10 points. But now it's been back and forth, where today it shows the Democrats with a 5-point advantage in terms of overall approval, just narrowly underperforming the overall national average. That puts Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in tricky positions. Even if John Fetterman and Connor Lamb seem to be polling well, Pennsylvania is going to be very close in 2022. There is not going to be some large blowout. Right now, the reason why I put the Democrats in the advantage and not the GOP, despite the GOP having control of that seat right now, is largely due to the fact that Democrats have strong candidates and the Republicans do not. Same case in the state of Wisconsin. Ron Johnson has been really making people a lot angry, making people very angry across the state in terms of the way that he promotes vaccine hesitancy, in terms of the way that he promotes COVID-19 conspiracies, and in terms of the way that he backs President Trump almost every single time that he can. Looking at Wisconsin, looking at Pennsylvania, Democrats only have the advantage because of the faults of the GOP, not necessarily because of the strength of the Democratic Party. But that still puts the Democrats at 52 to 48. So to look at some of these changes, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, and North Carolina all got more Republican. The rest of the states seemingly have stayed the same, but margins do matter. And looking at this final map here, there are a couple of things that I do want to point out as major points as we sort of end off this video. Right now, many people expect the Senate to be exceptionally close, and so do I. Like I said in the beginning, while it may seem that the Democrats have the advantage, they are quite literally 3 steps away from being in the minority. 3 steps away. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, all states that I characterize as tilt, which means a margin of less than 1%, just means... Sorry guys, my screen recorder cut out, but I was finalizing my point by saying that all the Republicans would need to do in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia was to have an incremental gain in terms of Joe Biden going down in overall approval and just a shift in support across the state relative to where they were in the past and what they will be in 2022. So Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, all eyes there. But my main takeaways here is that Democrats still hold that advantage. They are still at 52 seats by the final map here. But it should also be cautioned by the Biden approval rating. Joe Biden may be popular now, but what's to say if his approval rating drops by 2 points by 2022, or even goes into the negative? They can kiss Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia goodbye, they being the Democrats. But also, the GOP doesn't exactly have top-tier candidates like the Democratic Party does. Pennsylvania, the lieutenant governor of the state, who was with one of the largest margins for a Democrat in the governorship in recent history in Pennsylvania back in 2018. In addition, Wisconsin has just a lackluster GOP incumbent who has not even announced whether or not he's running. There are no GOP candidates announced in the state of Wisconsin. People are waiting on a Republican candidate who probably won't perform too well regardless. And COVID-19 seems to become a major issue again with the Delta variant, the Delta Plus variant, whatever variants are now coming out across the nation. People are going to be impacted by it. We might go back into the lockdowns. Mask mandates are resurfacing. Vaccine mandates for individual schools. Things are being ramping back up in terms of COVID-19, and it is unfortunate, but it does end up helping the Democratic Party because the Democrats seem to be the most proactive party in terms of the way that the American public views it on COVID-19. Joe Biden is still heavily favored in terms of the way he handles the virus, handles the pandemic, etc., but all around, I will say that COVID-19 might become a major issue again for 2022. And these sleeper states that I did want to point out, the states that I wanted to just say might end up being more competitive than otherwise thought. These are Nevada, New Hampshire, Arizona, and even Missouri. Now, I understand it may be weird to see Missouri as a safe Republican state, but if Eric Greitens receives that nomination, Missouri might move down into the likely column. But other than that, Missouri probably will be pretty solid. Nevada might end up being much closer than originally thought, especially if Republicans can take up that advantage and win over more voters in the Sunbelt region, specifically suburban voters, including Arizona, with the same type of characterization. And Nevada really all depends on Chris Sununu. But New Hampshire also depends on Chris Sununu, but it really just depends on whether or not he takes more national positions or not, because that race might not necessarily be as competitive as otherwise thought, or might even be way more competitive than previously thought. So the map here stands at 52 Democrats, 48 Republicans, Democrats flipping Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, holding on to Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and New Hampshire. Republicans are able to hold on to North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, Florida. So while the GOP may be at the disadvantage by the finalized map here, they still have plenty of opportunities looking at it moving forward to actually flip Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia back to their column, assuming that this map is finalized. So all said and done here, the GOP does have opportunities for major gains in the United States Senate. They are just a few percentage points. In fact, according to this map, 1 percentage point away from winning back the Senate majority through Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. So all eyes there, all eyes across the nation, and I will update you guys next month on my updated 2022 Senate election projection. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.